This is the 8-Bit Beast and welcome to the next part in my TAS tutorial. This part's likely going to be long awaited for many people as we're finally talking about 3D movement. We're going to be moving away from 2D video games. Now I'm going to break up this video into sort of two different parts. We've got the linear 3D games like a Crash Bandicoot where you're just moving forward in a straight line and it's not super open-ended, you usually don't control the camera. And then in a later part, we're going to do the more open-ended games like a Banjo-Kazooie where you can control the camera and go any way you want. As we'll see once we dig into it, these two types of games have very different optimization methods. Now let's fire up our game of choice. In this case, we'll be playing Crash Bandicoot 3. You'll notice on the left side of the screen I have got my position watchers going, and they're coming from ScriptHawk, which I've talked about in the past. So if your game is supported by something like ScriptHawk, that's fantastic and it'll make things really easy for you. But if it's not, you're going to have to find these position values yourself. Now 3D games are a bit more advanced than the games we've been looking at so far. And sometimes what they do is dynamic allocation of memory, which basically means your X, Y, and Z positions can move around in memory, which is really, really painful if you're trying to deal with it. Best case scenario, what you want to do is look at the player pointer and see if you can see where it's pointing to. That'll generally point to your X, Y, and Z positions. I mean, if you really want, what you can do is you can RAM search for them every single time you do a level because they'll stay consistent there, but that's not the most efficient way to go about it. Anyway, once you've got your position and your speed values, we're going to go around optimizing speed. Now to do this, you want a nice flat area of the game. So you'll notice here if I move, my X position is not moving, only my Z position is moving. Now Y is going to be up and down jumping position. And then X and Z are going to be your sort of left and right moving positions. This is a good place to look at optimizing speed. An example of a bad place would be something like this bit. You can see if I hold straight down or straight up, the camera is sort of moving as we go. And so X, Y, and Z are not good, but here it is. Now this could be a bit better because we've got like a slope here and you generally want to optimize not on a slope. When I played this game originally, I used one of the Pyramid Tomb levels and that had a really long straight section that I could learn how to optimize movement on. But basically what you want to be doing is looking at how you can maximize your movement speed per frame. If you try and look at just frame by frame, you can see I'm moving 22 onto Z. And then if I were to slide, that'll speed up to 36. So 36 is good. And if you're familiar with this game, then zigzagging can make you go up to 49, which I'm doing now, which is really cool, and then so on. I'll talk a bit more about optimizing this later, but that's the general idea behind what we're doing here. Now you might be wondering, why have I got you to pick a straight bit of ground? The reason for that is we really clearly want to optimize DZ. So how far are we moving in the Z position, not optimizing how far are we moving in both. Because otherwise, if you just do a diagonal slide, take this one for example, you can see I'm already sliding at something like 46 on DXZ. That's the watch just sort of on the left here, which is way too fast. And the reason for that is this game has a weird way of handling diagonal movement. But the point is that goes besides the thing we're actually trying to optimize for, which is moving along the Z axis. And this is something that I call Z optimization in Crash games. It's a really important philosophy to keep in mind. And it's pretty much how I went from being really bad at TASing these games to being able to make TASs of these games. Alright, so I want to talk a bit about what I mean with Z optimization in this game, and in 3D games in general. You've got here a picture of your level, very simplified. You've got your X-axis along the corners, the right-hand side, and then you've got your Z-axis going up and down. So basically you're going to start at the start, finish at the end, and I think we can all agree the fastest way to get there is to take a straight line. It is what it is, you just go straight from the start to the end. Now, you can get thrown as a TASer when you see a path like this. You might be tempted to like curve around the corners and take everything really tight, but no, you just go straight, start to end. That's it. So that's sort of the core of TASing 3D games. You want to think, where are you going? And you want to plan out the linear path to get there, taking the least distance possible. If you remember back to maths, it's all like coordinate geometry, distance formula stuff, but you can usually get it intuitively without actually having to sit down and do the maths. That's how this stuff kind of works. So I want to show you another path here. The potential could look like that. Again, you just take a straight line. So you'd be tempted to curve around the path and sort of maybe go in close early on and then hug the wall really close, because that's sort of what you do in like a racing game. But no, you just take the straight path start to finish. But it does get a little bit more interesting if maybe I move the path to the right a bit. There we go. So if you try and take a straight path there, oh whoops, you can't go there because it's like out of bounds or whatever. So probably what a lot of people would do in their initial attempt is to go something like this. They go straight to the path because they're used to trying to optimize for the z-axis. Then they'd follow the path really closely and then they'd come out and go to the end. That's actually not that good. What you probably want to do instead is take a straight line to where that path sort of meets there, and then take another straight line off to the end, just like that. So if I turn off these original ones, you're sort of taking a straight line and then taking another straight line again. And that's going to minimize distance as much as possible along this. So you're going to run into situations like this. The real key thing is optimize for whatever axis you're trying to optimize for on the level. That's going to help you solve it as quickly as possible. There's a little caveat here in that sometimes your character can move forward at full speed and then a little bit right or left. And in that case, it might look like you're moving forward and right all the way leading up to this, and then you never really have to take a sharp turn. I use that a lot in the Crash 1 TAS. Alright, so let's just go ahead and imagine you're trying to optimize this and find the fastest way to move. You might start by holding up, that's really great. So there we go, we're holding up and we're maybe moving, probably help if I turned off recording mode. We're holding up and you're moving, let's say 22. So that's great. You've heard something about zigzagging in Crash before, so you decide to try it. You hold left and right and then see how that goes. You clone the frame a few times and it's like, oh yeah, zigzagging sucks. Okay, cool. Then you remember somebody told you jumping helps and you try jumping and then it still sucks. And then you don't know what to do. So that's sort of how optimizing this game goes. What I'm going to do is just pin the up button to always be held, and then we're going to clear off this stuff. So if you play Crash casually, you'll know that sliding is a really good idea. So you try that. There you go. And then sliding makes you go faster. So you're looking at your DZ value, and it's going to be minus 36 now, which is really good. Sliding's really great, but you sort of come to a stop here, and then you have to speed Crash up again to walk. So that's not good. So maybe what you do is you try spinning out of your slide. And then spinning out of your slide looks pretty good. That just brings you back to walking speed pretty much. And then once you've done that, you just keep walking, which is cool. All right, that's great. So then what I'd do is I would pin like a little 7,600. I know that I'm at 83109, and I'd make a little note of that. So 7,600, 83109. And then you could try this zigzagging thing again. So maybe it'll work now if you're sliding. Yes, it does. And then you can put in a few zigzags, see how you go. And then 49, 45, 49, 49, 49. That's really great. So if you look at 7,600, we're now well beyond where we were without zigzagging. 83040 with, and 83109 without. Now be aware that you're going down every frame, so that's really good. And we probably saved several frames just by doing a zigzagging there. Then what you might do is try, okay, well, I know that the up arrow maybe move up, but what if the analog stick does a bit better? So you try, maybe you make a note of it here. So maybe here with one zigzag, you're at 83089, and you actually do want to make a note of it this time so you don't forget. So usually what I do is I just say 7,600 and I say 83089, just like that. And I'll know what that means. So I keep that in mind as I'm TASing. So that's really good. Then we want to see if doing analog stick will do anything different. So this is where I need to talk about analog sticks. PlayStation will go from 0 to a lot. Back when I TASed it before, it was actually 255, so I don't know why it's that big. But anyway, that is what it is. And then you've sort of got left stick X and left stick Y. So those are the ones we're going to be using. So basically, rather than holding up, you can hold any of those. That's going to make me go straight right. but this is going to make me go straight up and down. It's really weird that it's 65, 535 now. It was never like that when I TAS crashed before. Anyway, it used to be 255 for me, but I'm pretty sure that's not going to make you move as fast. Or maybe it will. Anyway, it will. Alright, so what I usually do is move the columns off, so right stick can go and right stick can go, and then you're just left with the important ones. Especially in these more complicated games, you want to sort of get rid of all the junk on screen that you're not going to use. So then basically this is going to become 0 and then 255. So if you think about it on a joystick, I'll pull out the virtual pad here. What you're actually doing is those coordinates are like coordinates on the joystick. So if I look at the virtual pad here, oh yeah, no, it is like what it is. So X can range from 0 to 65, 536 like that. And then you can pull it back to 0 there. And so the middle would sort of be 34404 or whatever it is. If I look right in the middle, it's half of 65, 536. So yeah, that's important to note. 0, 0 would be up there, and then 65, 536, 65, 536 would be down there. Just like that. Different joysticks behave differently. So I know the N64 one, 0, 0 is right in the middle, and then left is minus 128, and then right is positive 128. But anyway, if I wanted just nothing, I could sort of go in the middle there like that. Cool, so that's sort of how the stick works. So if I want to move forward, you can see Y is going to be 0, and then X is going to be in the middle. So if we can try and replicate that. You can sort of get Crash moving up, and he's moving at the right speed. So then what we want to do is slide, and then we want to sort of go back and forth. So you can try sliding and zigzagging earlier. If you do zigzag too early, Crash will go sort of left. So in this game, you want to just zigzag left, and then right, and then left, and then right. So the 65, 535 is right, and then the 0 is left. So essentially the inputs with these analog inputs here, what I've done is I've held up the whole time. 0 on X is left, and 65, 535 is right. So that's sort of what the inputs look like there. Yep, so I think what I did before was one zigzag, so let's check that. And we'll see what the difference is based on our notepad document 7600. Is going to be 83089, whereas I've got down here to 83083. So it turns out that zigzagging with analog is actually a bit faster, and that's what I found when I was doing this game. So it's important to check both types of movement. Even if you think it's going to be faster to use your D-pad, it's not always. So that's actually a disadvantage that the runners of this game have, is that if they could zigzag with analog, it would be good. Now, I haven't really talked about why zigzagging works, which I can show you here. So basically, like, if you move up as Crash, your speed's going to be kind of like 22. But if you move diagonally, your speed's going to be 28, which is faster. And that sort of works in that you keep your 22 speed in the one axis, but you sort of keep it in both axes. It does go down a bit, it does go down to 20, but it tries not to slow Crash down in any one particular direction if you're going diagonal. So by going in diagonals, you can actually move at a faster total speed. Now you might be wondering, would it be faster to just go through the level diagonally because I'm moving faster? And that's where we come back to this Z optimization thing. You would see that 28 and want to move Crash diagonal all the time because you're like, oh, he's going faster, it must be faster. But it's not, because if you look at the Z, which is the main one we care about, like how quickly am I getting from here to the end of the level on the Z axis? It's not actually any faster with zigzagging, with moving diagonally. In fact, it's slower. The thing about zigzagging is it tries to move Crash in these diagonal directions, but Crash can't actually move, like rotate that fast. So it applies the full speed of the diagonal movement that you would have, but Crash is sort of locked into facing forward by this slide. So that's how zigzagging works. It takes that diagonal movement speed and moves you forward. Anyway, you basically just got to look out for lag frames, but that's the premise of it. So then what you can do later on, also if you figure out you're going too far to the right, you can like insert another frame of going left with the zigzagging and it'll fix it a bit, just like that. And then what we could do now is we could go like, okay, well, how do I want to exit this slide? Do I want to spin? Because I could spin and that would be pretty fast. And then I reckon zigzagging the spin would be pretty quick. So maybe if I spin here, the zigzag can still make me go a lot faster, sort of like that 28-32 range, which is great. Or you could jump, and then if we jump, what happens? Well, I go pretty fast in that 28-32 range. But you always want to check with the 3D games about your speed cap, as well as 2D games really. It turns out that if you try jumping, you could try completely letting go of your joystick altogether. So what's that going to look like? Kind of like that. And it's like, oh, I'm still moving at 36, which is a lot faster, but Crash is sort of losing speed. You can see his velocity decreasing there. So eventually, once you get too low, you have to actually start zigzagging again with the jump. This is called a neutral slide jump in the Crash community. So it's a bit faster than doing a normal jump out of a spin. The advantage is, well, you keep a lot of speed. The disadvantage is you have to jump, which means that it's longer until your next slide. So you have to be really careful of that. So basically the trade-off is, do you want to go fast or do you want to start sliding again and go even faster? Turns out in an RTA speedrun, it's much more optimal to neutral slide jump because you obviously can't perfectly zigzag in an RTA speedrun. But in TAS, it ends up being faster to do a slide spin and just tank the spin and zigzag through it. So that's something that people often notice when they watch this, is they'll see me slide spinning in the TAS and they'll be like, oh, but I thought neutral slide jump was faster. And it's like, yeah, it is faster if you're a human and you can't zigzag perfectly. But when you can zigzag perfectly, the the normal slide spin is faster. You've also got to check with different games because, for example, Crash 2, if you want to do a slide spin, you can let go of it and do a neutral slide spin, which is really good. And it's a lot faster than this because you stay on the ground, which means you can slide quicker again. And you also have that neutral speed, which means you go a lot faster. So Crash 2 is a really fun TAS for that reason. Yeah, but pretty much what you want to do if you're trying to figure this out from scratch is you'd find a flat bit of ground, you do a bunch of neutral slide jumps, see how that goes, and then you'd do a bunch of slide spins all zigzagged and see how that goes, and then see which one gets the furthest the quickest. But you'd have to chain together several of these because you don't know whether neutral slide jump or slide spins can be faster until you see the context of the whole movement and how long you have. Now in practice when making the TAS, I would know, like if I've got to jump over an obstacle, for example, I would time it out so that the neutral slide spin, so that the neutral slide jump happens over that obstacle, which could be really good. So I know this section's been very Crash heavy, but it's these common themes that I want you to take into any other game that you play. So it's the looking for moves that speed up your movement. For Crash, that's a slide and a jump. It's looking for opportunities to zigzag. I can pretty much guarantee there are other games where zigzagging will work. So have a look, do your diagonal speed, see if that's any faster. If it is, there's probably an exploit there to be had. It's the Z optimization, so it's moving in a straight line, and it's all those tools and techniques you're going to bring into other games that you play. Now, just while we're on Crash 3, we need to talk about these jet ski levels because they're the most ridiculous example of Z optimization you'll see. You hold X to go forward, so we're just going to keep that held the whole time. And then you're going to kind of be weaving around and dodging obstacles and everything. Now you'll see my DX speed and my DZ speed are both at 68.266, and that's because I'm traveling perfectly well along this axis right now. Let's just see if we can take a straight line to the ramp here, and then we'll see what happens. So maybe if I want to go a little bit left here, you can see my DZ speed has gone down, but my DX speed is still the same. So if I look at this, my total speed is 86, whereas if I was going forward, my total speed is 96. And if you turn perfectly straight, my total speed is 71. And that's because what's happening here is not a constant speed on the jet ski. It's a constant maximum speed along each axis, which is so weird when you start TASing it. So we'll turn around at the start of the level. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to try and catch this ramp and see if we can take a straight line going towards it. So this seems good. Yeah, right. So let's see sort of what frame we hit this ramp on. Maybe if we have, when we go off the end of it would be a good metric. So there. So 6154. That's something we can note. We're off the ramp. Now let's have a look. So what if I didn't turn at the start? I think we can agree the way that I did it in like a normal game there would be pretty close to optimal. You turn around at the start and you take a straight line to the ramp. But let's not turn around at the start. Let's go all the way down here and follow these apples. And then we're going to weave left quite a bit. And we're going to sort of realign ourselves to the ramp. Let's see what frame I go off on here. Maybe 6158-ish, 6160. So the reason that I'm off a little bit later there is just due to some of the weird dynamics with the waves. But you can probably see that it doesn't really take any longer, maybe like 1 or 2 frames, to take this horrible, terrible detour that looks so suboptimal. And the reason for that is Z-axis optimization. So well, in this case, X-axis optimization, because that's the axis we're aiming for. All we actually need to do in this situation is get our X coordinate down to a particular bit where the ramp is. So yeah, here for example, again, 6160. So it doesn't really matter whether you take a straight path there or not, as long as your X value is constantly being the maximum, which is 68 or whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. In fact, I could sort of weave back and forth here. So I could do some horrible weaving, which would normally lose you time in a TAS terribly. But we'll probably see 6160 again. So even all that weaving, which looks so suboptimal, actually didn't lose me any time at all, not a single frame. And that's because the entire time where I was weaving, my DX speed was 68. So it's such a weird feeling, and it goes completely against all of your physics knowledge. But Z or X-axis optimization is real, it's actually a thing. Now before we finish up, I do want to show you an example that is not from a Crash Bandicoot game, and I find this one really funny. This is Elmos Journey on the Nintendo 64. It was also accompanied by a game called Elmos Letter Adventure, which is about English. So pretty much, we just walk normally. Now an N64 controller is going to go up to 128 and down to minus 128. And normally on a retail controller, you can sort of hit this range, which sort of goes up to about 60. But in theory, the N64 controller can go a lot higher than 60. And it turns out if you do that in this game, Elmo goes fast. So yeah, that sort of breaks the game pretty much. What runners actually do in this game is they have their controller, they sort of calibrate it so that when they're holding down on the controller, that recalibrates. And that sets it so that when you're neutral on the stick, it's actually like holding full up. And then on hardware, they can actually hold double this length. But be aware of that. With the normal walking speed like this, it's not always the maximum walking speed, especially when you're in a TAS. So a TAS of this game would look really cool because Elmo could just walk like really, really fast everywhere. And that's something that's probably going to happen on quite a few games that you do it, just because they weren't expecting it. The other thing that they usually don't expect is if you see on this analog range, it's a circle. And that's because most analog sticks lock you to a circle movement. But in theory, most actual analog ranges are in rectangles. So you can sort of hold a diagonal on the stick here, and Elmo's going to go really, really, really fast. So it's good fun to play with. Anyway, that's going to be it for this tutorial. Hopefully you found it useful. I think the main things to keep in mind are how analog sticks work on coordinates. And then next time we'll get more into sort of the open-ended TASing using this, which is a lot more complicated to deal with because you have to path out your movement and everything. If you enjoyed this, then a subscription is always appreciated as it really helps out the channel. I hope you found this useful, and I should have more coming out like it soon. Thanks for watching.